Hey everyone, James Niggemeyer here. Thank you for tuning back into my YouTube channel. One of my favorite things to do, if not my favorite way to catch bass, is flipping and pitching with a long rod, a 7'4" to a 7'11" to specific targets. But I really love flipping and pitching and punching heavy matted vegetation, whether it's hydrilla or hyacinths or coontail, what have you. Matted vegetation, thick vegetation where I need a larger weight to punch through is got to be one of the most exciting ways to catch them, and it's one of my very favorite ways to catch them. So today I wanted to go over my flipping and pitching setup, the rods that I use, the lines that I use, and the baits that I use whenever I'm flipping and pitching in heavy matted vegetation. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Really, that's the best thing that you can do to help me grow my channel, and certainly I would appreciate it. And if you like the video, give me a thumbs up, and obviously drop a comment in there. Let me know what you think. Love to hear from you guys. I use 3 different rods for flipping, pitching, and punching. The first one is a 7'4" heavy, and I'm not really gonna get into that one because I don't use that necessarily for punching heavy matted vegetation. So I'm gonna go to the 2 larger ones, which is the 7'6" and the 7'11". The 7'6" is a Team Loose Custom Pro Speed Stick, and it's their Magnum pitching stick. It's a 7'6" heavy action, or heavy power, fast action. I like this rod because it gives me the power to pull those fish out of the heavy grass, but also the sensitivity to feel those bites, because a lot of times when you have all that line going through the vegetation, it can be hard to detect them. And sometimes they absolutely just mouth the bait, so the bite's not very distinct or crisp. So you definitely need a sensitive rod. I'm using a Lew's Pro TI. I like that reel. It's a 7:5 gear ratio reel. Helps me to really maintain control of those fish in the heavy cover. I'm going with 50-pound test Strike King braided line, and with this particular setup I've got 20-pound or 25-pound gamma fluorocarbon joined by an FG knot, and I like that for my 3/4 and 1 ounce, and even some of my 1/2 ounce for more sparse or scattered vegetation. But from 1/2 ounce to 1 ounce, I like this rig, and I like the fluorocarbon leader, specifically if the water's really clear or the vegetation isn't really thick. So the fluorocarbon can actually give me a few more bites, and I believe that. The other rod that I like is also a Lew's. It's their Super Duty 3. I like the 7'11" because it gives me the ability to drop that bait right into the heaviest, thickest cover and pull those fish. It gives me that power to pull those fish and the leverage of the 7'11". It's a heavy power fast action, and I've got that teamed up with a Lew's Tournament Pro. I've got also 50-pound test Strike King braided line, that tour grade braid. And with this one, I'm gonna be putting weights anywhere from 1 ounce all the way to 2 ounce and more. So I like that heavier rod for those bigger, heavier weights. I've got a Strike King slither rig joined to an Owner jungle flipping hook, and I snell that knot. So I really do believe that the snelling process puts a few more fish in the boat for you. Forgot to go over the knot on this one. With this one, I'm using that gamma fluorocarbon leader material, and with that, I'm not using a snell. I typically go with the Eugene slip knot. As far as baits go, I will flip a jig, but when I'm flipping plastic, the different baits and shapes and sizes that I like are, I love a Strike King rodent, which is a beaver type bait, but I also like the Rage Bug, the Menace grub. Every now and again I'll use the Rage Craw, and a new favorite one of mine is a Strike King Punch Bug. Those are really the baits that I use for punching heavy matted grass when it comes to plastics. I'm not going to go into the jig at this time, but when I'm flipping and pitching heavy plastics, these are what I'm going to be putting on. I forgot to cover one more thing. I definitely peg my weights, because when you're flipping and pitching with that heavy weight and it goes into the vegetation, that weight will go ahead of the bait and the bait will get caught up in the vegetation. You don't want that. You want the bait and weight to stay as one piece and go down to the bottom. That's how your bait's going to get down to the fish. I do use a bobber stop when I'm using the fluorocarbon leader, and then when I'm using straight braided line, I like one of those rubber peggets, but at this particular moment, actually I just have a bobber stop on this one, but I do prefer those rubber peggets when I'm using straight braid. Well, that's the setup. Let's go see if we can catch a few fish punching and flipping heavy vegetation. I'm not sure if you can see this right now, but there is heavy matted vegetation underneath the surface there, down about 4 to 6 inches below the surface. Some of it's just barely topping out. I mean, it's in big tufts and clumps from like 12 foot of water, 11, 12 foot of water out to the surface right here. And I'm flipping these big clumps or tufts as they billow out, and they create a large canopy on this off the bank kind of ridge right here. Starting out with the punch bug and slither rig. I believe this is 1.25 ounces. It'll get down to the bottom quick in this 11 to 12 foot zone. And when I do this, I pitch in there, and then on a slack line, I let it just fall to the bottom. Oop. There's one. Oh, yes. Look at that one. Pretty fish, golly. Another good one, punching the heavy vegetation, the matted grass. Well, not matted to the surface, but matted below the surface. Thick and healthy fish. Oh, that's just what grass produces. Yes. I think I'm gonna need a new rage bug. Well, it wasn't a rage bug, it was a punch bug. But I was able to straighten it back up and get it to work again. But that fish was really unique because it was kind of like what I was telling you. Some of those fish won't be on the bottom. You pitch in there, like I just flipped in there, it sunk about 2 feet and stopped. So I reeled down to it, felt it, and then cracked her. So that was, you always got to be watching your line, because that's how you know if a fish is intercepted and on the way down. You want to be watching your line and be really paying attention, because some of those fish, like that other one, really there's just no bite to it, and almost lost that fish. But that one I was on top of. I saw it stop on the way down and reeled down to her, felt it, and there she was, and I cracked her. Nice strong hook set. Always want a nice strong hook set when you're fishing this heavy grass like this, just because a lot of times they could eat it and go right or left, and then they could have that leverage, and you set the hook and it just absorbed by the grass and the bow in your line. So you got to have a nice strong hook set to get those fish, a higher degree or higher percentage of those fish into the boat. I think one of the most important keys to presenting this bait in matted vegetation is the vertical fall on a slack line. When you first pitch it in there, you don't want to engage the reel and have it pendulum back to the boat. You want to drop it out there, and then as you can see, my slack is just laying on the surface, so you know it's falling on the slack line. That is the key. You don't want to do this. You don't want to flip in there and just hold it, and now it's just penduluming back. And the other thing that'll happen when you do that is it won't make it all the way to the bottom. It'll just drape over this grass, and you don't want that either. One of the keys also is trying to figure out what depth they're at in this grass. Sometimes, you know, you're flipping heavy grass or hyacinth or some sort of vegetation in 2 foot of water, and they bite it right as it goes through the mat, but that's because there's not a lot of room for anything else underneath there. However, when you're out here in this 6, 8, 10, 12, and even deeper grass, you need to figure out where are those fish relating. Are they underneath the surface of the canopy, or are they down 6 feet, 5, 6 feet? You want to almost count it down and try to get an idea for where they're at. Once you pitch it out there, make sure it goes all the way to the bottom. And then once it gets to the bottom, I'll hop it a couple times, and then I'll lift and just try to get an idea and yo-yo it around. Try to figure out where those fish are related in the clumps. If you're driving down the lake and you see those slick little areas like that on the surface, that's usually a great indicator that there's some sort of grass that's topping out and it's breaking that ripple, creating that slick area. Some beautiful grass right here. Right now, I'm just trying to look for the irregularities in the grass. You have like a little grass point right here, and that actually acts like just a point on the land or underwater. So they're always relating to the edges. They're looking for potential places to ambush prey, and the edge is exactly where they are most efficient at catching prey. And then I'm just kind of flipping every, say, 3 feet or so and looking for the area where they're kind of grouped up, because they will group up in this grass. If you flip in there and it doesn't sink, it's one of two things. It's either caught on a piece of grass or a fish has it. So you want to kind of check it out and weigh it a little bit, like lift up on it to see if there's pressure. And if there's not any, then you can go ahead and shake it so it falls through the grass. Such a pretty little clump of grass out here off the bank. Just flipping every 3 feet or so, kind of canvassing the area. And what you have to kind of realize is that underneath that canvas or underneath that canopy, it's kind of broken up. And what ends up happening is, as soon as it breaks through about 2 to 3, 4 feet, it opens up, and those fish can see that thing coming from a distance. They actually have a greater view underneath the water, so they can see it. So you don't have to just inch along 1 foot by 1 foot. You can actually flip out there and cover some water, say, like I said, every 3 feet or so, 2 to 3 feet, flip, and just that way you can actually move along at a pace and not just sit there on dead water where there's nothing happening. Little guy, right on this point. There's a point of grass right here, and he was right in there. He didn't feel like much of a bite. I kind of hesitated for a second. He's fun though. I like to get back in there and see if there's his mother or daddy in there. Okay. Golly, I didn't feel that one bite. It was just, I thought it was stuck. Oh, yes. Look at that one. Golly, that's a pretty one. That's the kind of stuff you catch in that pretty hydrilla like that is in the lake. Punching the heavy weight through the matted vegetation. Wow. Absolutely love catching them this way. Love catching them this way. I don't know that I don't like catching them anyway, but just pretty fish. Wow. Nice. I tried hard to mess that one up. I was convinced it was just hung up in some grass because there was no bite. I flipped in there and it got to the bottom. I lifted up on it and it was just solid. It wasn't even moving at all. So I thought for sure it was just, you know, clumped up into some tight wad of grass there. I mean, it wouldn't even move. I lifted up on it. Usually you lift up on it and it kind of moves, or you can feel a head throb. There was none of that. It was just solid, cemented to the bottom. So I thought I was hung up in the grass. But he held on tight to it and I got him. This is more sparse grass in here. We kind of ended the real thick stuff over there, but they will be in it. Thick mat right here. Slither rig just goes right down in it. It's got the profile of a jig because of the skirt, but it's like just like a Texas rig, so it'll just drop through that super heavy stuff like that and go straight to the bottom. Punch bug's a pretty thick bodied bait, but it's basically the rings. If you could see that, there's actually a normal size core in there, but the rings really give it some bulk. When fish are really wanting something that's, you know, bulky, or feeding on something that's bulky, that really makes a difference. Just kind of barely poking it out the other side. You can feel the point. Cinch everything back up, back in it. Look at that one. Boy, there's almost no bite on this fish. Pressure type stuff. Look at that fish. So thick. I mean, there was nothing on the bite. Pretty fish. Woo! Love catching this way. Love. Flipping, pitching, and punching matted vegetation or heavy grass like hydrilla or hyacinth or something like that with a flipping stick and a big heavy weight and some sort of soft plastic creature bait in and through that heavy grass and setting the hook on something big in there with braided line. There's just something that never gets old about that. It's just so much fun. That tug of war, pulling them through there, cutting through that vegetation and flipping a big fish in the boat. Gosh, it's just so much fun. It's got to be one of my favorite ways to catch them. It for sure makes the short list. That's the gear, the whole setup, rod, reel, line, baits, weights, hooks, the whole thing. How I flip, pitch, and punch heavy matted vegetation and grass. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, please give me a thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. And then also, leave me a comment. Love to hear what you think about this video. And until next time, thanks for watching and good fishing.